Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. For decades, tobacco control preached the end of tobacco-related disease and death. They called it the tobacco endgame, and every new restriction, tax hike, and campaign of demonization was justified in service of that goal. But today, that mission has been abandoned. As safer nicotine products deliver a smoke-free future to more than 25 million Americans, Public Health has declared a new war they call the nicotine endgame, which is a goal many now see as delusional. Joining us today to unpack the nicotine endgame is Skip Murray, a tobacco harm reduction advocate, Substack writer, and former vape shop owner. Skip has seen the full arc of this fight, from helping smokers to quit to counseling vape shop owners facing ruin, all while championing a simple but powerful idea: #Be kind. Skip, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, we're going to have some fun here. We're going to approach this from several different directions. We'll dig into the pathology of tobacco control and how the nicotine endgame actually operates. We'll look at how that thinking shows up at the highest level through comments from Marty Makary, the U.S. FDA Commissioner, in a recent interview. And we'll test whether #Be kind still holds up in the face of what we hear. So let's start. Skip, when people talk about the nicotine endgame, what do they actually mean, and how is that different from the smoking endgame?
I think some of them still, it's the tobacco endgame, but the definition of tobacco has changed, where before it meant smoking, and now it means anything with nicotine. And that's taking the focus off of ending the death and disease caused by smoking.
Is it as simple as moving the goalposts?
I don't know if I would call that simple, but that's what's happening.
At what point did tobacco control stop focusing then on the tobacco endgame?
I think when it became evident that consumers were going to migrate to smoke-free products, and then an overwhelming concern about any youth that initiated use of those products.
Why don't you tell us a little bit in terms of your impressions about how much of an impact safer nicotine products like nicotine vapes have made on the lives of smokers?
Huge. So many people, millions of people have quit smoking. They're experiencing better health, more active lives. They're exposing less people to secondhand smoke. Children aren't growing up with the example of people smoking, so there's not that behavior to mimic when they get older and curious. It's just been huge.
Would you say, is it fair to say that public health, tobacco control is now treating nicotine itself as the enemy?
I don't want to say all of them, but there is a large amount that are, yes.
In your mind, what are the telltale signs that the nicotine endgame is operating more like an ideology than a public health strategy?
The lack of focus on the science, an unbalanced debate over youth, and completely giving up talking about people who smoke. There's no emphasis on older people at all anymore. It's like, just let them die. Problem will be solved.
I think that's a good point. Often when we've looked at this issue, it kind of felt that tobacco control and public health were hoping to just wait out the older smokers, kind of wait for them to pass along.
It really feels that way. We really feel forgotten. Like we just don't matter. Like we're disposable. We're as disposable as the vapes that they all complain about. It's sad.
Now, public health uses a concept called the precautionary principle in order to justify a lot of these actions. Could you explain what that principle is, and is it appropriate?
It is a huge fear of the unknown. So even though we have known for decades how harmful smoking is, and these new products come along and we don't know, and instead of taking the risk of it maybe being better, And now we know that they're safer because we have enough science, even if it's not 50 years worth of science. They don't want to take the risk. What if? And they only think of what if bad things instead of what if this is a good thing.
So the FDA is the regulator in charge of e-cigarettes, to use their term. In the U.S., how would you rate the manner in which the FDA has regulated e-cigarettes?
Mm-hmm. It's been very slow and very frustrating. I don't think there's been clear communication all along. I think a lot of us were expecting like a more streamlined process, or a process where we could bridge off of each other's work because of the similarities in the ingredients. And none of that has happened. And so there's a lot of frustration because there's a lot of attention on unregulated products, but because we haven't put enough products on the market to meet demand, that has pushed consumers to the market that the FDA doesn't want them purchasing from. And they've been under a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of that pressure has affected their ability to do their job. You know, there's so many large public health groups that are pushing the FDA to not authorize anything. And I think they're just stuck between a rock and a hard place, and consumers are the ones that are suffering because of it.
One point, Skip, and I'd like you to talk about this. There was a thriving and very vibrant vape shop, like retailers, a community of them, a very robust industry in the U.S. I think at one point in 2019, I think the number was 11,000 vape shops, and a lot of shops were dedicated solely to nicotine vapes and helping customers, switch from smoking to vaping. Is that picture the same today?
No, there's way less vape shops. And a lot of them, in order to survive, have had to become hybrid. So some have even brought in tobacco. Some have brought in CBD, candles, herbal wellness type things, t-shirts, food, coffee, anything to survive. A lot of shops have closed in the last 5 years. It's just tragic. People who smoke are losing that support network. They're losing that sense of community. Without the shops, we don't have somebody communicating to consumers when legislative action could harm their choices. So they're not knowing to call their congressman or their city council person or whatever. So that has hurt not only the health of people who smoke and helping people quit smoking, it's hurt the fight to keep the products on the market or to get more products on the market. So it's always been a grassroots effort, but that grass lost a lot of its fertilizer in the last 5 years.
Which brings us to U.S. FDA Commissioner Marty Makary. Makary was appointed by President Trump in early 2025 and took the helm in April. In an interview last October, he's openly derisive of vaping and reinforces many of the myths that now dominate tobacco control, particularly around vape shops. Many of our viewers haven't seen these clips, and we put together 3 packages. Here's the first.
I want to ask you about vape shops. I see them pop up everywhere. We talked about California, but I see them honestly all over the country.
During the Biden administration, there was a mass proliferation of vape and smoke shops and gas stations selling illegal Chinese vaping products. We walked into this realizing, hey, what's going on here? These vape shops are popping up in every corner in America like mushrooms, and no one really understands them or talks about them. Turns out 85% of the vape products are illegal Chinese vape products. Some of them are designed to make kids addicted. It's everywhere. And just remember, there is no fruity flavored vape product that is legal in the United States. That's most of what's in these stores. And so you have all of these illegal products sold on every corner in America, in every neighborhood, and no one talked about it. No one understood it. And so we walked into a mess. And I quickly did some research. We were just in Chicago announcing the largest raid to date of illegal Chinese vaping products. I was doing some research on that greater Chicago area. They have 100 Starbucks in that area and 1,200 vape shops and smoke shops and other retailers selling these illegal vaping products. They're everywhere. They're dominating our society. They're around military bases. They're around college campuses. This is an epidemic that has been in part a silent epidemic, but it's starting to destroy lives. And it's not just the vape products. It's opioids. You can walk into these vape shops and literally buy an opioid. It's called concentrated 7-OH or hydroxy or hydroxymetragenine. It goes by several names. We call it collectively 7-OH or hydroxy. It is 13 times more potent than morphine, and you can walk into one of these vape shops in America and buy it like a cup of coffee. We have got to wake up.
And anybody could just open a vape shop and start selling illegal drugs to children?
They're popping up everywhere, yes. And there are drugs in there.
Skip, I want your unfiltered reaction to what we just heard.
You couldn't hit the bleeper button fast enough if I gave you an unfiltered reaction to that. Whew. That is frustrating. That is, oh my goodness. There is so much misinformation in there. There is so much fear-mongering. Notice how right away it starts out as a political thing. Biden did this, so already we're working on the division in America between Democrats and Republicans, which is a huge problem right now. False claims. There is no way that anybody is designing these to addict children. It is not legal to sell them to children. You design them to appeal to who can buy your product, which is adults. You have to make them appealing and satisfactory enough to help people switch from smoking. So his every corner thing, the comparison, this is so funny how people can twist numbers. Notice he said, was it 100 Starbucks to 1,200 retailers selling vapes? Okay, is Starbucks the only entity in all of Chicago that sells coffee? Because if you're going to compare how many retailers sell coffee to how many retailers sell vapes, you should count all the people who sell coffee, which would be a lot of convenience stores, which also sell vapes. So that was a clever way to twist the number and make it sound like it's something really, really, really bad. I hate that constant use of the word epidemic. Tell me, if we're helping people stop smoking, how is selling a vape destroying lives if it's getting people not to smoke? To me, that would be saving lives, not destroying them. Then, of course, we've got to bring in the whole scare over drugs. And if there's drugs on the market that shouldn't be on the market, I don't know anything about this opioid thing he was talking about, but don't we have a drug enforcement agency that's supposed to deal with that? Isn't the FDA supposed to deal with drugs? So if there's a problem there, where are the authorities that are supposed to be taking care of that problem,
And certainly he's conflating nicotine vaping with the use of opioids. Is that appropriate? Is that fair?
No, not at all. We're still fighting so much information, even from back in 2019 when we had the whole EVALI thing with the THC vapes. So many people, regulators, journalists, public health groups lump all of it together. And those are each a separate issue and should be kept separate. And they're not doing that. So yeah, he just, that was a very good job of making moms all over the United States go, oh my gosh, what are they doing to my children?
It seems that he's oblivious to the FDA's own contribution to creating this problem.
I don't know a better term. I don't really like unintended consequence, but I think nobody considered what would happen once all the dates took effect and these products were regulated. What would happen if you didn't put enough products on the market to meet consumer demand? So I don't think the FDA considered that possibility. I'm sure a lot of the public health groups didn't. It's just not going to go away. As long as there's a consumer demand, there's going to be somebody willing to sell products. At least if it's in a retail establishment, you would hope most of them are being responsible and checking IDs. But we also have people on TikTok selling products and people on the street selling products, and they don't care how old somebody is.
And he mentioned, that there are no fruity flavored vapes that are legal in the United States. And that's because the FDA has been running a de facto flavor ban for the last 5 years.
It feels that way to me. As far as I understand how it works, they've been expecting companies to prove that a fruity, let's say a strawberry, so we can pick a flavor, is better at helping people quit smoking than a tobacco flavor. And it's really hard when there's so many flavors on the market and so many personal preferences to break it down by flavor. And if he was reading the studies that I've read, he would know that having a choice of flavors helps more people stop smoking and not go back to smoking. I don't think he's read the studies I've read.
So I appreciate that you brought that point up, because one of the key things that the FDA has been demanding in the PMTA authorization process has been, large population level surveys, randomized control trials, to try to get to this point where you can prove that fruit flavors are not going to have a negative impact on teens and their health. But this next clip is going to, I think, give people a better understanding of where this particular FDA commissioner lies on the use of large-scale population survey data. Let's have a listen.
Anybody who is watching this that knows a teenage child is aware of the epidemic of vaping in our country. And I have to imagine that it's not good for kids. Is there anything that you guys can do on the FDA front to fight this prevalent epidemic of vaping?
What else is in those vaping devices? Formaldehyde sometimes, heavy metals like lead. So we have stories now of high schools that say once a month a kid goes to the hospital, sometimes in an ambulance, because of popcorn lung. We hear stories of individuals that have quit their lives, that have gone down a very dark road because they have to steal in order to get these vaping devices. We hear kids that are not attending class because they're in the boys' bathroom where they keep the vaping pens in the tiles in the ceiling because it's off the radar of the school. This is an epidemic in the United States, and nobody was paying attention to it until President Trump came into office. And one of the reasons why we were asleep at the wheel as a medical establishment is that the CDC put out a shoddy study that said that only 5% of young people are using vaping products. And they'll claim that that's the lowest level in a decade. What they don't tell you is the study survey was methodologically flawed. And you talk to any high school in America and they will tell you 30%, 40%, 50% of the kids in that school are regularly using these products. They're addictive. Kids go down the addictive pathway of lying, cheating, stealing, even from their own family and loved ones, of living a dual life. And there are tragic stories of kids that have gone to the hospital because of what's in these things.
So, Skip, what do you make of that? I do have my hand on the bleep button here.
I think you're trying to make me eligible for blood pressure medication. It is really hard to listen to that. I know it's not true. I don't approve of the use of the word epidemic. I didn't approve of it when the FDA first started using it. It doesn't fit the clinical definition of what an epidemic is. That term came from a study that the FDA did with young people, and that word had the biggest effect on them. And at the time, the FDA also noted that that would deter some adults who smoke from trying vapor products. But to them, it was worth the risk of adults keeping smoking if it kept young people from starting vaping. He then goes into the formaldehyde and metals and blah, 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 blah. He obviously hasn't read the classics, because there's a well-known saying out there that says, dose makes the poison. He never once compares a nicotine vape to a combustible cigarette to give some perspective on all of them. And then what did he go into next? Was it popcorn lung? I just about fell off my stool. Once somebody's mind is made up, how do we get him to look at other evidence? You know, there are no documented cases of popcorn lung from vaping or smoking. It's just the wrong thing. And then he segues right back into the politics since President Trump came in office. And you know, he mentions a CDC study, but notice he doesn't tell us what study. So we can go look it up and read it for ourselves and make up our own minds. That part irritates me.
He's saying essentially that's not right. If you talk to any principal at a high school, he's going to tell you there's 20, 40, or 50% of teens vaping. You talk to any teenager, and they're going to tell you 20, 50%. I mean, this is insane to have an FDA commissioner be utilizing anecdotal information to defend what's going to be, you know, the largest enforcement action on vaping in the U.S. history. After Scott Gottlieb and Mitch Zeller over the last 10 years routinely dismissed adult success stories and user testimony as mere anecdotes, yet here Makary is dismissing vaping and the national survey data because it's showing that fewer teens are using vaping products.
Doesn't fit the narrative, does it? Then the shocking part was right towards the end there when he got into the, children leading a dual life, that they're, suffering from addiction or lying, stealing, cheating, whatever. Was that guy ever a teenager? My gosh, when I was a kid, myself included, all my friends smoked. That's the first place we got our cigarettes, was stealing them from mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. You know, how many times did your parents go out and you hit the liquor cabinet? It's not the right thing for young people to do, but it is what young people do. You know, now I'm not justifying youth breaking the law, but he's making this sound like this is something new. He's making it sound like these children are addicted to something way more harmful than nicotine will ever be. And it just raises this moral outrage and just motivates people to fight for and pass laws that will hurt people who smoke. You know, we could be reducing our numbers, our percents of people who smoke in this country if we do more to help them.
Skip, when the FDA commissioner tells the public that national data is shoddy or flawed, but treats his own anecdotes as truth. What does that do to trust in the regulator?
For me, it destroys it. Completely destroys it. I honestly, I don't know where to go to trust anybody. My husband's having health problems, and I do not know where to turn to learn what I need to learn to help him, because of nicotine. There's no health groups I trust. There's none I donate money to anymore. I won't go on the CDC's website and look up the challenges he's facing. I don't trust them. I don't trust any public health groups. It's hard to trust doctors. It's tragic.
I think it's important too. I know that you would agree that, I mean, we have businesses and families that are supported by the U.S. vaping industry, and he's not showing any deference to that being a positive at all.
No compassion at all. And when this industry took off in the United States, this was not something from the legacy companies. This was mom and shop pops, people who tried vaping and quit smoking and were like, wow, I got to help other people do this. It was the American dream. Start your own business, make your own way, make a difference, make the world a better place. And there's no acknowledgement of that at all. So many crushed dreams, just sad.
Okay, we've got one more clip, and this one matters. Listen carefully to what the FDA Commissioner says about doctors' knowledge and what he claims they don't know. Let's have a listen.
I'd imagine that anybody watching this would say, well, it's probably better to smoke a vape than a cigarette because cigarettes will cause lung cancer, and there's studies behind cigarettes and lung cancer. Are there serious studies that doctors are taking seriously about the dangers of whatever content there is inside the vape? Because I haven't heard about those. I've always heard, well, it's probably better than the alternative, or it's not that bad, or I'm buying it from a reputable source. I mean, I see people walking around with vapes all over the place.
I talk to doctors about what's in the vape stores, and they say, I don't know. I ask them, what % of high school kids are vaping? They say, I don't know. Talk to a high schooler, they'll tell you 20 to 50%. I ask the doctors, what % of the vape products have THC? They say, I don't know. It may be a third or more. I ask them, what are the other ingredients in these vape products? They say, I don't know. So it is true that if you are using an FDA-approved vape product, which is designed to transition people from combustible cigarettes to another form of nicotine delivery, where you're getting nicotine delivered in a way where we know what the chemicals are in that product, that it is less dangerous than combustible cigarettes. That is true. But what we are seeing is an epidemic of young kids vaping from scratch, not transitioning from cigarettes. And they're vaping with illegal products where we have no idea what those chemicals are. And when somebody comes into the hospital, we have no idea what's causing the lung damage.
Okay, Skip, what was your reaction to hearing that?
Just plugging away at that blood pressure, going a little higher and higher and higher. First off, I am grateful that at least he did admit that the products that have been through the FDA process are less dangerous than smoking. So out of the 3 clips you played me, I get to pick one good thing. But notice he said approved by the FDA. The only nicotine products that can be approved by the FDA are medicinal products. These are authorized, and that's a huge difference. And you would expect the head of the FDA to be using the correct terminology. And I get a feeling that neither him or the lady who's interviewing him actually know very much about the topic other than what they've heard. She started out with smoke a vape. There's no combustion. You cannot smoke a vape. Impossible. He doesn't correct her. He goes then into his rant about doctors. Why isn't anybody educating the doctors? If the FDA can spend money to on the real cost campaign, first to get people not to smoke and now to get children not to vape, why can't they use some of that money and educate doctors? That's a huge problem in this country. A big percent of our doctors believe that it's the nicotine that causes the cancer. COPD, they don't even know the difference between smoke and nicotine. And I would hope that organizations like the CDC and the FDA would be educating them. And I don't see any of that happening at all.
Which is what makes it so bizarre that he brings up that doctors don't know anything. What point is he trying to prove with that, except for FDA's failure in terms of communicating the continuum of risk?
I don't think he sees that failure. I think he's super, super focused on this whole panic thing we have going on here about illicit, cheap Chinese vapes. If you want to fix that problem, you could spend millions and millions of dollars on enforcement. And humans are clever. They'll find other ways to get it here, and they'll find other ways to buy it. The best way to combat that is to get more authorized products on the market so consumers have more legal choices. And I understand his concern about a young person who has never smoked taking up vaping, because we always talk about switching from smoking to vaping. But the thing he doesn't seem to acknowledge or realize is that a lot of young people take risks. And if vaping wasn't here, how many of those young people would have smoked instead? I'm sure education has done a lot to drive down the number of youth that start to smoke, but I don't think it's the whole story. I don't think taxes are the whole story. I don't think Tobacco 21's the whole story. Like it or not, I think part of the reason we have such a low rate of youth smoking is because the kids, still breaking the law, I understand, are vaping instead of smoking. And I think that's a really uncomfortable thing for a lot of people to acknowledge.
So he mentioned that this was a mess created by the prior Biden administration, and then until the Trump administration took power again here for its second term, it's only then that real efforts are being made to understand what the problem is. Yet, however, he seems to forget that President Trump addressed the vaping issue in great detail in 2019 and 2020, and he claimed that he saved vaping once in his first term and promised to save vaping again in his second term. So it's not like that the Trump administration 1 and 2 has no experience with vaping at all. So does this sound like the Trump administration is saving vaping?
Oh, heck no. Far from it. I mean, I was happy to see this new pilot they're doing with a streamlined process for pouches. I hope they perfect that system quickly and then start incorporating vaping into it. But yeah, a lot of the problems we have now were problems we had the first time Mr. Trump was our president. And since the cutoff date for PMTAs, that problem, and the FDA started denying marketing orders for so many American products, that's when the illicit market just took off.
Let me ask you, after hearing all of this today, Skip, has Dr. Makary shaken your belief in #BeKind?
Oh, heck no. I don't think anything will shake my belief in that. Enemies don't change minds. Friends change minds. And I think sometimes, we like to cite the science and correct misinformation, but I think a lot of people just look at us like trolls or shills. They have all kinds of names for us. They don't take us as credible. And I think the only way to ever make any progress is to hear them out and find out why they believe what they believe, even if it's ludicrous to us, and then share why we believe what we believe. I'm finding it's better off at first not to talk with people I don't agree with about nicotine at all. Find other things in the world that you have in common. Do you kids, grandkids? Do you like to golf? Do you sew? Anything. And establish a relationship first.
All right, Skip. Well, final question, given everything that we've discussed, what would a sane, achievable end game look like? One that reduces harm, respects people, and doesn't lose its moral compass?
I think if we would find a way to get more legal products on the market, that eventually we would see smoking become obsolete, or a very small percentage of people that would smoke. Technology would take care of the rest. You know, it's like, how often do you see a payphone anymore? How many homes have a landline? How many offices have a typewriter? All through history, humans have always made things better. And the market could take care of itself. And someday I wouldn't wake up and think of 1,300 people dying today. And it's a hard day today, because today is the 14-year anniversary that my mom passed away. And she smoked heavily her whole life. And she had COPD, cancer, and heart disease. I call it the trifecta of smoking. And I sat with her the last few weeks of her life while she was in hospice care in her home. And I was sitting with her when she passed away. And to me, the perfect end game would be someday a daughter wouldn't have to say goodbye to her mom years before she should have. That would be the ultimate to me.